and welcome to episode 16 of the Breaking Bio podcast. Today is February 1st, Friday, February 1st, and we've got our regular line of co-hosts here.
Hello, this is Rafael Maya, PhD student at the University of Akron, Ohio.
Howdy, my name is Sam Evans, and I'm a master's student also at the University of Akron.
Hi, I'm Tom Housley. I'm a PhD student at the University of Stirling in Scotland.
And I just realized I didn't introduce myself, so I'm Stephen
Everyone
Hamlin.
knows you.
Yeah, University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. And we have a special guest with us today who has finally managed to get on the internet. We're joined today by Chris Buddle.
Hello, I'll introduce myself as well. Chris Buddle. I'm an associate professor of insect ecology at McGill University in Canada, and although I'm an insect ecologist, I actually study spiders, so search committees at universities don't really pay attention to entomology versus arachnology, so I was okay with that.
My advisor in Brazil got hired for an insect ecologist position. Never studied an invertebrate. When she got in there, she was like, fuck it, I'm studying birds.
Yeah. It
So you're
doesn't
not
seem,
that far off.
no, it doesn't seem to matter, really. It's just, more about the sales pitch, I guess. As long as you somehow fit the description in some general way, then you are whatever they want you to be. Sure, ornithology, herpetology, arachnology, that's all good.
I'm starting to look for a second postdoc / long shot at faculty positions, and that gives me a little bit of hope, truthfully.
Yeah, because it's there's so few positions related to what people actually do. You know what I mean by that? I mean, we have to be generalists when we look for jobs. So suddenly, no matter how specialist you think you are, you suddenly become a generalist when you look at job descriptions. Say, sure, aquatic terrestrial interface ecology, that sounds good, because I study some stuff near water that's on land, and it's
They have water in their bodies.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Chris, why don't you tell us about the main thrust of your research?
Okay, in a nutshell, I do study arthropod ecology. Primarily, my own interests taxonomically are with spiders, but in my lab I have people studying pollinators and beetles as well as spiders. The bulk of my work is definitely ecological with just a smattering of taxonomy, so I can pretend every now and then that I know what I'm talking about with taxonomy. But the truth is I have pretty serious taxonomy envy, and had the world been a bit different, I probably would have enjoyed going into taxonomy instead of ecology. So I took a back door to taxonomy, became an ecologist first, and then recognized that to do good ecology you need sound taxonomy, especially with arthropods. So that's kind of how I got into arthropod ecology, I suppose. So yeah, the bulk of my own personal research is definitely with spiders, and more recently spiders and other arthropods in the Arctic, with a little bit in the greater Montreal area also. So there it is.
So I think you mentioned on Twitter you do some work on wolf spiders.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are, beasties that get a lot of happy attention on the internet. So why don't you tell us a little about what you've done with them?
Yeah, it's funny. You go to these arachnology meetings, and it seems like 3/4 of the talks are on wolf spiders. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. It's oh my god, it's the wolf spider symposium again. Oh look, it's 3 more students of George Oots talking about schizocosa, and look, it's behavior of pardosa. But it's for a good reason, because they're pretty model organisms, and I think the big benefit is females carry around their egg sacs, so you can actually do life history work on them. That's you can get further than saying, oh, I saw them in the spring. It's more like, oh, I saw them in the spring, they must have mated, and now I can count babies. So it provides an opportunity for really good studies in life history, but also studies on deeper studies on behavior and evolution of traits, etc. They're model organisms, and you can stick them in a lab and feed them crickets, and they'll grow, which is helpful.
So for the listeners at home who don't know much about wolf spiders, can you tell us why they're interesting?
Well, they're big and hairy.
If you needed that, you just go down to the university gym. Like,
To quote, the guy you mentioned earlier, noted wolf spider ecologist George Utz, Hogna, one species of wolf spider, is big and hairy and scares the shit out of everything else.
Yeah.
So that there alone is a great reason to study wolf spiders.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're recognizable to most people because they are fairly big and hairy, and they're everywhere, and they have really high densities, especially in open habitats, and in some cases in forests as well. So they're readily apparent, and that makes them kind of a model group. Although taxonomically they're a big mess. Some of the genera are just a disaster. People just assume that they have species when the genetic morphology is just so variable. No one really has a clue unless you do some barcoding.
I read something a little while ago, and I don't know whether this is a ridiculous myth or not, but it said that wolf spiders got their name because they hunt in packs.
That's a myth.
Which I found faintly terrifying until I actually saw that the ones that I was looking at were about 5 millimeters long, which is less scary. Although I don't know how big the packs are supposed to be.
Yeah, I've never seen a roaming pack of wolf spiders.
Holding to the moon.
That would be my nature paper.
Well, they have the vibrating mating calls, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, they're not nearly as complex as like jumping spiders, but they do have fairly sophisticated courtship behaviors, and some labs in the States have done wonderful work on sort of trying to piece together these courtship behaviors, and there's vibration as well as movement and different cues left by mates, etc. So yeah, it's fairly complex, although I would say pales in comparison to the jumping spiders, but it's definitely in some cases more interesting than some species where some web building species are kind of boring in the courtship relative to the wolf spiders.
I think I read a paper a little while ago where it was on opportunity costs of courtship, and they could show spiders and a little video of another spider drumming, and even though there wasn't a female around, the male would be like, "Fuck, one's drumming, I better do it as well."
Great impersonation, Tom.
Yeah, I like that.
I've been working on it.
All day. And actually, I seem to recall, I think George Utz and some of his students had these systems where they had shadows of frogs and other predators that they used in a screen, and then just responding to that visual predatory signal was enough to elicit responses in the wolf spiders. I remember going to a conference and I was like, "What is this for real?" Because there's like this. It was like being in an old movie theater with the shadow of a frog going across the screen, and the spiders are doing their thing. So. But yeah, I mean, you're right, Tom, that they're in many cases the cues that elicit different behaviors in the wolf spiders aren't very well understood, except for a few species, but it can be vibratory or visual or a combination.
So you mentioned that you study Arctic spiders, spiders in the Arctic. So
yeah.
how does that go? Are there any?
That's hilarious. That's like the most common question I get when I say I study spiders in the Arctic. People say, "What? There are spiders in the Arctic?" And yeah, for sure. In fact, there's densities of wolf spiders are recorded. I think I did a quick calculation to make it numbers per hectare because it sounded better if it's bigger, but it's 4,000 spiders per hectare just for adult and subadult wolf spiders in the Arctic. So they're easily, if you include subadults, there's easily 1 per meter squared. I would estimate. That's on the tundra, and that's fairly typical for open habitats for wolf spiders. But then in the tundra itself are other species as well. And so yeah, there's definitely a reasonable diversity and a lot of biomass tied up in spiders in the north. That's actually pretty interesting because they feed a lot of bird populations, and people love birds. So I hear.
So what are the actual spiders feeding on? Like, is there
Each
like
other.
a big each other. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's funny actually because there's they are generalist predators, but in fact, I think one of their main prey items are other spiders, and I don't think they, we always talk about spiders as being the first. They arrive very quickly after disturbances because they balloon into new habitats. And then people are like, well, that's great. What the hell do they eat? They show up and there's nothing to eat. Well, there is, so there's spiders, right? So in fact, the cannibalism and interguild predation is probably way more dominant than people realize with spiders because they'll just chow down on anything. So
Well, that's horrifying.
yeah.
In case you needed something else horrifying about spiders, there you go.
Yeah, and then they get parasitized as well, right? That's also, we could come up with some analogies about that as well. But to stay on topic, in the Arctic we found parasitism rates of some wolf spiders were as high as 50% by parasitic wasps, which is absolutely tremendous. In the literature, it's more like 10-20% would be high, and then in the Arctic it's 50%, which is to me just tremendous. And that's these little ichneummonid wasps that put their eggs in the egg sac of the wolf spider, so then the mother spider's just carrying around a bag full of wasps instead of babies. And then there can be like 10 or 12 or 15 of these wasps in the egg sac, and half of them are most of them are wingless. So when they crawl out, it looks like ants crawling around in the tundra, but there's no ants on the tundra, so it's confusing as hell until you realize it's ichneummonid wasps that don't have wings.
Wow.
Wow. That's so here's
That was a good face. So, whoa, what do I do with that?
Do you know, has there been much work done to look at why these wasps are wingless? Or why there's variation in whether they have wings or not?
No, well, this is where I get to pretend I know stuff that I really know nothing about. I have no idea, but let me sound professorial. Yeah, the truth is, no, actually, we have no idea. Not only that, the genus is Gelis, G-E-L-I-S. It's a complete mess taxonomically. That's the wasp genus, and there's some Finns that are trying to work it out. But in our research, we find relatively few winged and mostly wingless. But I have no idea why, and no idea, what the overall ratio is or anything. No idea. Most of them are wingless, but that may only be under high density conditions where there's lots of egg sacs around. So you got to imagine these little wingless wasps lying in the tundra, and they like reach up and grab an egg sac as a spider walks by. It's kind of a cool thing to think about.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether you thought it had something to do with the density, because I guess flight is so expensive for insects that if you can do without it, then maybe it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's my hypothesis for sure, and I'm going to go back to the Yukon this summer to try to get a proper density estimates of the spiders and wasps at the same time, because all our evidence is indirect or correlative.
So how long? So they obviously overlap in their phenology, but how long or short rather is the season up there in the Yukon? I mean, what's your window of opportunity to go up there and see these things? Is it 3 months, 1 month?
There's often still snow in early to mid-June, and so late June till late August is the season, and then but snow will often fly in August as well. But it's really pretty short. And the first wasp parasitism that we see is actually in late June, but then all the wasps are flying out of the egg sacs in late July. And we see it because we collect spiders, and we're sitting in the little shelter cabin thing, and like, what the hell are these things flying around? And we're looking at spiders, and all these wasps are coming out of the egg sacs, right?
I'm always
the campers don't find it that interesting.
I'm interested in stories like that because I'm basically a theoretical biologist. My biggest problem is walking down to the vending machine. So, I'm wondering what kind of, interesting field stories you have from the Yukon, things that have gone horribly awry or...
Wow, that could be a long conversation.
Not a great sign.
Actually, horribly wrong. Yeah, not so much. I mean, there's been moments because you're completely isolated. There's no internet. There's not even telephone, and there's one spot within a 600-kilometer road that has a gas station and a phone. So if you're in trouble, you're in pretty deep. I mean, one issue is that the road floods out all the time, so you're not sure when you're getting back. Sometimes when you drive up there, it starts to rain, and you're like, oh, okay, the road's gone. It's kind of, I mean, I imagine it's like Australia in some ways, one road to nowhere.
We call that Sydney.
Yeah. But other field stories, yeah, I'd have to, the Yukon and the Arctic work not so much. I've had more problems in boreal forest with black bears. I mean, black bears are super annoying for a field biologist, for sure, because they really like the preserved we put in pitfall traps, and so this poor undergrad, hired undergrads to do work, and this poor guy was, every time he went to this one site, he'd see a bear every time, and I would never see it, and he'd be like coming back, I swear I saw the bear, it was there again. I'm like, yeah, you're full of shit, there's no bears in here. And it just went on like this all summer long, and then sure enough, he wasn't with me on the last trip, so I did the route through to see the traps, and sure enough, there was the bear staring at me, looking at me like, there you are. So this poor undergrad, who I basically called a liar for the whole summer, was, of course, 100% correct.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Are you sure it wasn't a disgruntled undergrad in a bear costume?
Yeah, I know.
I better show it to him.
I don't think he became a field biologist.
Yeah, well, who would?
Yeah.
You wrote a post a little while back about how you've got into social media and how this has changed your life. And I mean, we're sitting here talking on a podcast, so it seems like a valid topic to touch on. How has social media been a big influence on your science and how you communicate it and your general professional life?
Oh yeah, that won't take long. We'll let you talk about it. Actually, we just had a lab meeting with another group that's in our department that's interested in starting a blog and wants to kind of venture into social media. So we're talking about the benefits of social media with them a little while ago. So I think social media makes you raise your game a little bit and connect with a broader audience and a more interesting audience. And it actually starts research collaborations. There's things I'm doing now that I only doing because of people I met through social media.
Like you've already established collaborations through social media.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And it's even just, well, you could do it with a fax machine and a letter or with an email, but come on. I mean, that's slow and it's difficult, but we can do things a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently now. So I think that's what it is. It's just social media is just a tool, but it's a really good tool for science, and people don't realize that. And my colleagues think there's like 2 of us that have Twitter accounts in our whole department, I think. And actually, no, sorry, in our whole faculty. So we have 100 profs in our faculty, and I think 2 or 3 of them have Twitter handles. Just so people think it's a joke, they don't understand. So like, well, come on, try it out. It's a tool. Here's some approaches to do it. So, and my chair would never, he supports me in terms of recognizing that the blog is a part of what I do. But I would never count it towards my, my actual, when I have to come up with my performance reviews and things like that. It's counted as something extraneous to the actual activities I get paid to do. But hey, look, my post got 300 visits today. That ought to get me a raise.
So you're touching on one of the issues that, obviously I'm a convert to the power of social media and science, but to play devil's advocate for a second, there are people who say, well, there's things like opportunity cost, right? The time you spent writing that blog post, you could have been writing a paper. Or, as you said, this isn't being counted towards your professional achievements. And what would you say to objections like that?
Well, those are absolutely valid objections if that person's not actually writing papers.
Good one.
At the end of the
That's
day,
my mistake. I knew I was forgetting something.
Oops. no, at the end of the day, if you can be a productive scientist and blog and use social media, that's great. They're completely complementary. I think what happens is, I see this a little bit with social media. Some people, I think, are replacing aspects of social media with other activities, but you can't. They have to work together. Otherwise, the one feeds into the other. So, yeah, if you're not getting your papers published and not doing your work that you really do need to do in terms of the job description, which really is about publishing papers and sitting on some committees and teaching courses. If you're not doing those things, but you have a hell of a good online blog, then I think someone has a right to say, what are you doing and why are you spending your time this way? But if you can do both, it should be recognized as being complementary and synergistic in a positive way.
So do you think that this would be, I mean, there's a kind of an extreme viewpoint in this that says that basically all scientists should have a Twitter account and all scientists should have a blog. Do you think this is useful for everyone, or is it going to be a case-by-case basis? Yeah,
I mean, I think it requires, you got to be willing to put yourself out there and have pretty broad shoulders, right? And I think a lot of people aren't, and that's a character and a personality thing. And some people, absolutely, they don't have the right a degree of interest, and they may not have that a real willingness to be exposed in a social media world, and I totally respect that and understand that. So I don't think it's for everybody, and that's where the idea of having multi-authored blogs really comes into play, and having other options where professors can be engaged in the process, but not have to commit perhaps at an individual basis where it might be a little bit uncomfortable for them based on their own sort of personality and approach. Yeah, that's my general response to that.
Because Crystal, who is our occasional co-host, she's one of your graduate students, right?
Yes, she is. Yeah. We've had some interesting conversations about social media.
Well, I was just wondering how that goes along when you're quite heavily involved with social media as well. Do you monitor hers and make sure that she's not spending too much time on there? Or
well, I'll tell you a little story. I don't know if she'd want me to tell this. Yeah, she probably wouldn't care.
Well, we're going to hear it now.
Well, why not? What's she going to do? She's not here. She's the reason I got into this, because she had quite an active blog and a really interesting profile in terms of her own interest in natural history and entomology before she came to the lab. And so she was putting some posts up. And yeah, I was kind of tracking them to see what was going on. I was kind of intrigued by it. And then one day she put up an idea that a scientific, creative idea that she was talking about as part of her thesis. And I said, okay, we have to have a talk about this. So she came into the office, and I said, what the hell are you doing? This is a really great idea. You shouldn't be sharing this to the world on a blog. This doesn't make any sense. So we got into a bit of debate about it, and that actually forced me to reconsider what it means to collaborate and share ideas through social media instead of just through the lab meeting or just through a meeting with a supervisor. And that totally changed my perspective on it. And that's actually the point where I really recognized the value of it. She convinced me of it and changed how I approach social media. So she's totally to blame. And she basically made the point, look, there's a community out there to help, not to hinder the process. So we should take advantage of that and make it part of what we do. So yeah, she's totally to blame. I think I'm pissing her off because my blog's better than hers right now.
Do you print out your stats and put them up in the office?
Hey, look how many hits I got. No, but on a more serious note, I mean, she's productive as a grad student, and that's what I was saying earlier. If you can be productive as well as have a social media profile and it works together, that's absolutely awesome. There's no conflict there. And actually, this term, she's really turned off, her blogging and her social media because she has to identify a gazillion beetles, and that's great. She made that decision. I didn't tell her to make that decision. She said, well, I recognize that the balance has to be there, and if it's not there, then we refocus a little bit. And for sure, there'll be a time where I'll have to stop the blog and spend time with my family and things like that.
One day.
One day.
So how many people have tweeted you asking if harvestmen or daddy longlegs are the most venomous spiders, which is wrong on multiple levels? I get that question all the time. Every time I tell someone I study spiders, that's more often than not the first question. So I have to sit them down and go, well, one, they're not spiders, and two, you've been horribly misled.
Yeah, that comes up all the time. It's crazy. Well, that's like my most popular blog post is "Spiders do not bite," which is of course ridiculous. Of course they bite. Like, what a dumbass. I mean, who would write that? And people have said that. Of course they bite. And it's like, well, yeah, they don't bite. I should have actually titled it "Spiders do not bite humans." But then I thought, there's so many posts out there that talk about how spiders do bite that, bite humans. So I thought, well, I'll just be as extreme on the other way and say spiders do not bite. But that post, I think, gets hundreds of hits every week. And if I look on who's searching, it's like spider crawling up arm. Spider bite, real spider bite human. Spiders scare me. All these things get people to that particular post.
Yeah,
I love spider crawling up arm. I'm just imagining somebody with this big fucking tarantula on one, just typing with the other hand.
That's right.
I'm tweeting their experience.
I gotta run to
I
my
wish
computer.
I wish my blog search referrals were anything near that. Just nice and family friendly. What I think is really funny about the harvestman venom myth is that over in North America, then they're daddy longlegs, but in the UK, daddy longlegs is the term used for the crane fly. But we have the same myth about crane flies are the most venomous insects, and but they're too weak to bite you.
What would you call that?
Say that about.
Maybe.
Sorry?
Was it lateral meme transfer, maybe? Or lateral myth transfer?
I mean, crane flies are about the most wimpy things you could ever imagine. I can't believe people would actually say that.
It's not a spider. Something else bit you.
I always blame the wasps.
Wasps can bite? This is terrifying.
We're not supposed to spread more misinformation here.
Right.
Oh, gangs of marauding wasps biting people.
That's right.
After emerging from spider egg sacs.
Yeah, that are in your ear.
Yeah.
All it takes is one journalist to watch this podcast, and we are fucked. So quit it.
So maybe we should start talking about the deadly house cricket, just to ruin Tom's research.
That'd be fine. It would make people think I'm cool.
Yeah, then you can get really big research grants if you start connecting it to human health. So that's not a bad way to go.
Well, if he can keep his data alive for more than 20 minutes. Oh no, I made the Scotsman cry.
But it
I'm
is
really worried about my next experiment.
But it is an interesting point, though. I think going back just briefly on the social media thing, that the idea that scientists have a responsibility to dispel these myths, and the best platform for that is often the blog, right, or Twitter, or things like that. So I think that's a real valuable contribution that scientists can make, is to actually bring some facts to things like baby carrots and big hairy tarantulas biting and sucking the blood out of you. I mean, most of the things out there are crap, so we have a responsibility to fix it. And that's what Crystal always talks about, fixing the internet, and it's a big task, but we have to crusade on and do our best to do that.
We're going to need a bigger hammer.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on here, and so we're gonna wrap it up now. But I want to thank Chris for joining us today, and all of our regular co-hosts. So thank you for joining us for episode 16 of the Breaking Bad podcast, and we'll see you all next time.
Well, thank you. That was a lot of fun.